Let's actually talk about the states. So you mentioned you're in 5 states. What are they? What are the states you're in?
I started in Arizona. We got about 700 lots here in Arizona. And in a perfect world, I would keep buying them here. But the ones that I want to purchase, the sellers don't want to let go of them. So then I went to Texas. We got about 500 lots in Texas. Then we went to Nevada, so a regional presence. We have a couple hundred lots there. We went all the way across the country and bought something in Florida, which is more difficult to get to, but it was a pretty heavy value add project. So we bought that one. And then more recently, we bought something in Nebraska, our first
I
asset
see.
there. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty much all over over the map, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So share with us a bit about I've heard a lot about mobile home parks and everything from the smaller mom and pop parks that you can buy fairly inexpensively with private money to the bigger multi-hundred lots parks where the institutional play. Share with us a bit about what is your buy box? Where do you play in that spectrum?
Yeah, so we like to buy parks between 10 and $40 million.
Okay.
So we like to buy quality parks that are more institutional quality, or at least they'll qualify for agency debt. Typically, we're deploying between $4 and $8 million per asset, and then the rest of it is debt. So like to have more manufactured housing communities instead of trailer parks. So
Got it.
there's still a great business buying lower quality trailer parks, with a higher cap rate and more cash on cash return. But you trade that off for lower quality and the likelihood for a higher degree of drama.
Mm,
Probably the same conversation as buying A or B class apartments versus buying B class apartments. I mean, it's the same trade-off. But
I
there's
see.
opportunity both sides of the spectrum.
I see. Okay. So like with that's really good to know. I was actually thinking you might say like the smaller parks because you talk about off-market properties and things like that. So
Howdy,
it
howdy.
had me went there. So what have I know you mentioned it's like the difference between A's and B's. In terms of the tenant base that, well, actually, in your case, you're just renting lots, so these actually owns the own mobile home. Then is that correct?
Yeah, hey, hold on just a second. I got a contractor out here. Can you hear that noise?
No,
If you hear
I
that noise,
can't.
let me know. I'll
Okay, no.
yeah, I'll go tell him to go work somewhere else. Say that question again, please.
Yeah, the tenant base, but I guess if you're just renting lots, you're not dealing with tenants. They're just renting the lot. They own they own the mobile home itself. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's the goal. Although when we purchase these, in most cases, there's some park-owned inventory that we get, and there's some vacant lots that we get. So there's a short-term ownership of park-owned inventory, but the goal
Mm-hmm.
is to sell them off where some of our parks are 100% occupied with all tenant-owned inventory, and the goal is to get all of our properties that way.
That's good. So I assume it's because you get a much better tenant base and you don't have to worry about any fixing or anything.
There are several reasons behind it. So
Okay.
fundamentally, the reason why mobile home parks are attractive, if you compare them to a Class A office building, they certainly don't look as attractive, but the performance is where they really stand out. So if you look at the most expensive event that happens in rental real estate, it's turnover. So you got a tenant in there, he's making those monthly payments and everything is great, and then he leaves. And not only do you have no income coming in, now you have to spend money to reposition the unit, market the unit for a new tenant, and then potentially offer some kind of incentives depending on where we are in the marketplace. In the mobile home park world, if you've sold the mobile home to a tenant and they own it and they're just paying you lot rent, all of those things disappear. So the length of stay, the difference is a residential tenant who's renting a unit sees that as a temporary living solution, whereas
Mm,
a mobile home park tenant who owns their home sees it as a permanent housing solution. Their intention is not to leave. That's their community. In some cases, they stay there their entire lives. So
uh,
that's the stability of it is the first things that really stands out. But the second thing that stands out is your expenses become dramatically lower. So as soon as you've sold your last home, now you don't have to have a maintenance guy on staff. So you're just doing common amenity, taking care of the roads and lighting and the common amenities. And you don't have somebody fixing toilets and water heaters anymore. That person is gone. So you can get your expenses dramatically lower than you can in other residential real estate. And then the third thing is you qualify for better debt. So in the world, in most commercial real estate, agency debt is going to be the best debt. There's tenant-owned occupancy requirements in order to qualify for agency debt. So all three of those are motivators to have the highest amount of tenant-owned occupancy. And then when you go to sell, the same thing exists. So both lenders and buyers know that the most stable version of a mobile home park, meaning the cash flow is something we can count on, is the one that has all tenant-owned homes and we're just the landowner.
Wow, I love it. I haven't really heard it talked about that way, so that's really cool.
Yeah, that's because you're not
Um,
talking to me, Tim.
yeah, I don't think I've interviewed anyone who's just simplify it and says you're basically in the business of renting land, like renting lots, and that's really cool. So, in terms with what the buy box you're in, you're playing along with the institutional grade type, buyers as well. What does the cap rate look like for you? What are you buying at typically?
It depends on the market that you're in. It will range between 3 and 7, depending on the
Okay.
market that you're in. And then also it depends on how much juice there is left to squeeze. So a lot of
Mm,
people will focus on the cap rate as the metric that they're concerned about, or they measure the strength of the deal. I'm more interested in the cap rate after I've squeezed the juice out of the property, meaning if there's vacant lots and there's vacant homes and there's any portion or combination of expenses that are higher than they should be or income that's lower than it should be, when I'm done stabilizing the property, what's my cap rate based on the acquisition price then? I'm more interested in that.
I see.
Us, we don't look at cap rate as we still pay attention to it because it is something to monitor. But the more important thing is, on a conservative basis, what's the yield expectation that my LPs are going to expect? And if I can hit a mid-teen IRR and over a 7-year hold period, and I can get their cash on cash from 3 to 4% up to 10% during that 7-year
That's
hold
good.
period, yeah,
Wow.
those are attractive for me.
Wow. Okay. So these deals cash flow really well then. Yeah, we don't really talk about 10% cash on cash in multifamily much these days.
You know, what's interesting, Tim, is the cash flow is what matters the most. So at the end of the day, you don't know where the market is going to be at the end of your
Hmm.
initial hold period. So if you're intending to exit it and you're assuming a cap rate that's similar to where we are today, that may not be the case 5 to 7 years down the road. So if you're same thing as if you're assuming that you're going to be able to reposition it and refinance, you don't know where interest rates will be. We can just look back to 2021 through 2024 and see where that would have been a problem had you underwritten in 2021 that you were going to refinance at the same rates. That
Right.
would have been the case. So I think it's really important to focus that don't have all of your yield come from the sale. Make sure that a
Mm,
portion of that yield comes from the cash flow as well.
that makes sense. So take us back into when you first did your mobile home park deal. You said you've done all of these single family, you've done multifamily, and then there's a light bulb that happens for you. So share with us about that first deal and what was it about it that had you went all in on the mobile home park side?
Yes, so admittedly, it was a small deal. So I was an apartment guy and I was buying a vacant apartment complex that had
Mm,
been offline for about a year and it had lost its conditional use permit to be used as an
hmm.
apartment. I went to the city and they said it doesn't have enough parking. So right next door, there was a half-acre mobile home park and that was sufficient to solve the parking problem. So I knocked on that guy's door and I bought the property
Oh, wow.
back to the city and said, okay, now I have my land. Can I proceed? And they still fought me. Today, by the way, that building is a government building. So
Hmm,
they probably had some intention or they had earmarked that for some of their own personal use.
gotcha.
But then I owned a mobile home park. So my thought was, this is no different than an apartment. It's just a bunch of people living on the same piece of property. I found out I was wrong. There's actually quite a few things that are different, but primarily the difference is the tenants own the homes. So if you have an apartment complex and you want to reposition it, you just evict everybody and reposition it and then re-tenant it. Well, you don't do that in the mobile home park business because those tenants own their homes. So you reposition the property around them and underneath them, the infrastructure and the landscaping and fencing and signage and all that fun stuff. And then they stay. Of course, the rent is behind market, then you raise the rent and eventually you arrive at market. And then you have a stabilized mobile home park. We did that. Took us about 12 months to go through all of that work. And we got a
Hmm,
local property management firm just to run it for us. Once it's fully stabilized, it's pretty easy. You can use third party. I wouldn't recommend that when you're repositioning it. That's something you got to do yourself. But it was the most stable cash flowing real estate I had ever owned. No drama, people paid on time,
Mm,
zero turnover, just checks in the mail over and over again. So when I saw that, we held that for about 3 years. The cash on cash was pretty silly. It was like in the mid-teens.
wow.
And that's after I had given the portion to the investors that were in the deal. It was really steady
Wow.
cash flow. So some of those smaller deals can turn out like that. On a nominal amount, it wasn't that substantial, but as a percentage, it was pretty ridiculous. But that's when I saw the light bulb came on. We were apartment guys and we were comparing it to our experience with this one mobile home park. We said, why are we not doing more of these?
Mm,
So that's when we went all in on mobile home parks.
I love it. Man, this conversation have me think so differently about mobile home park because whenever I hear mobile home parks, I hear trailers, I hear lots of drama, I would assume. So it's so interesting. And so the buy box that you're in, who's your typical competitors in that space? Are they obviously not too small, but I assume the really big guys, do they play in that space too? Or
Oh yeah,
who's
for
your
sure.
competitors?
Yeah, so we're probably in the top 25 percentile with respect to the competition in the space. And it is a competitive space. It's a small niche, and that's why it's competitive. The largest owners in the United States have over 100,000 lots, and
Mm.
we're a toddler in the industry if you by comparison, and we have a couple thousand lots. But yeah, the same type of properties that we're seeking to acquire, most of the intelligent professional owners and the larger institutional owners, they all are chasing the same product.